Welcome to Finding Certainty with your host and U.S. Army veteran, Patrick Laing. Over the next hour, you'll learn from Patrick and his expert guests how to attract more certainty into your business and your life. Now, here is your host, Patrick Laing.
Welcome to another episode of Finding Certainty. I'm your host, Patrick Laing. Today we're diving into a topic that's both simple to understand and I think even easy to believe in, but it can also be very difficult to master. At least it is for most of us, including yours truly. More often than not, we're too anxious. We're too eager. We're ultimately too impatient. This episode is part of our ongoing series on how certain core values and characteristics contribute to finding a greater certainty in life and in business. We've been going through the alphabet from A to Z. My very first episode was on A is for accountability. I talked last month about O is for openness. I believe being open and transparent is one of the keys to finding more certainty in our lives. I believe it is it's one of those critical characteristics that if we don't understand, if we forget, it can impact us negatively. Today, if you hadn't guessed, I'm going to be talking about P is for patience. There's a lot of different P words I could have used. I thought about passion. I thought about persistence. I already talked about E is for endurance. Those are kind of similar, but passion is a good one. I think you have to be passionate to be successful in life, but I felt that patience was worth us spending a little bit of time on. I mean, let's be honest. Patience is rarely easy. It isn't glamorous. It's challenging. Sometimes it feels like the last virtue in the world that we want to practice and acquire. I don't know about you, but whether we're raising children, leading a team, building a business, or dealing with opposition, difficult people, patience often feels like a test that we didn't sign up for and didn't want, right? And yet it's so important. It's even easy to feel like maybe we're being weak or even a victim when we show patience or when we turn that other cheek. But I disagree. I believe that you're actually strongest when you show it. I believe it is and can be an acquired trait. I believe it is absolutely essential that we try. It's essential to developing more certainty in our lives. So I do think it all starts with having realistic expectations. It's hard to be patient if you expect perfection because you'll usually be disappointed. There's a quote I've always appreciated that reads as follows. It says, "The level of our frustration is equal to the distance between our expectations and reality." Think about it this way. If your expectations are color up here, they're really high, and yet reality, as it often is, it is mortality. If reality is way down here, you're going to be extremely frustrated, or at least disappointed. If your expectations are lower and closer to reality, then you're just not going to be frustrated. You don't have to be disappointed. You're not setting yourself up for failure. Now, that's not to say that you lower your standards. It's not to say that you don't try. It's not to say that you don't do all the other things that are critical to finding success in your relationships and also in your life. But it's when we learn to manage the gap, to wait, to pause, to trust, and to hope. This is when we step into a whole new kind of peace. It's a peace, by the way, that starts with patience and ends with clarity. With clarity comes certainty. So let's talk about what patience really is. At its core, it's the ability to remain calm in the face of adversity. in the face of frustration, of delays, of difficulties, and even opposition. It's the skill of embracing, as I like to call it, the in-between, the not yet, with grace instead of anxiety or concern. And it is a skill, one we can practice, we can sharpen, we can master in time. There's a lot of different skills out there that we want to acquire. We've talked about several of them during these monologues on this show, like accountability, balance, composure. Let's run through the list. We've got discipline, endurance, faith, giving. These are all principles of certainty. They're characteristics. They're core characteristics that lead to a better life. H was about humility. I was on integrity. When I talked about J, I talked about joy, how it is a trait. It's not just an experience. It is an acquired trait. It's something we seek after. It's something we can create more of in our life, just as we can become more patient. K, I talked about kindness. L, it was a little bit of a different topic. I was right at Christmas time last year. I talked about light and filling our lives, our experiences, our interactions with light. Kicked off the new year by talking about M is for momentum. When I made the switch from Voice America on my previous platform to the Bold Brave TV network, the first topic I talked about, the first monologue I did, I called N is for next. I think it's also a technique, and it goes along with patience as well. When you're looking at what's coming next, when you can handle what's coming next, whether it's you've gone through a tragedy or a trial or had a success or a win, how do you handle what's next? Well, oftentimes it requires patience. Oftentimes it requires being humble. These principles of certainty, you see them start to mesh together and blend to become this beautiful kaleidoscope of success and of joy and of peace in our lives. So I'm still working on patience, but I do believe it is an acquired skill, and I think I'm getting better at it. I'm certainly trying to, because I know it's important. And if you will do the same, you will find more certainty in your own life as well. Now, there's a really powerful quote. It's in the book called Crucial Conversations, which is a phenomenal book about how to really, whether you're just talking with your significant other, your kids, or all the way up to they talked about, these geopolitical negotiations over nuclear power. These are critical conversations, these crucial conversations. In the book, the quote says, be sincere, be curious, stay curious. Don't just pretend like you are, but truly be it and continue to be it. He says, be patient so you can listen well as you live and lead with intention. So let's talk about that word for a minute. I think so much of these characteristics that I'm reviewing in these monologues, and this one as well, come down to intent. What do you intend to do? Who do you intend to become? What is your intention? This resonates deeply with me. It's a secret, and it's a strategy to always keep in mind, really, during any crucial conversation. It's obvious when we're patient, we become better leaders, better parents, better spouses, better friends. I'm constantly working to be a better partner to my partners at Certainty Management and Certainty Global. We stop when we do this, when we with intent try to be better, try to become more patient, more accountable, more integrous, etc. We really stop just coasting and hoping that happens. We, with intent, seek to help bring things to pass. In our conversations, we stop trying to control them and we start trying to understand them. When we do this, extraordinary things happen. With my nationwide sales team here at Certainty Management, and for the past several years as a professional sales trainer, I've taught my team what I call the objection resolution model. It's really founded in and based upon this principle of patience. Let me tell you how it works. It's for years now. I go back decades. I've been in sales for 40 years, but I go back and I think of the trainers like Tom Hopkins and Dale Carnegie, Zig Ziglar, etc. Well, many of them talked about how to overcome objections. And they're just saying how to deal with them, right? How to challenge them. But that word overcome felt very forceful to me. It felt very pushy. And I was, if anything, I was a pretty soft sell. I never considered myself a pushy salesperson. I've never tried to be. That doesn't mean I'm not assumptive. I've been highly successful as a salesperson and as a sales manager. One time I took a team from 3.5 million a year to 7.5 million the next year to 16.5 to 20 million. Literally in about 3.5 years, we became the number one office in the country out of 65 offices nationwide. We were literally selling more than number one and number two. And this was a remodeling firm in Portland, Oregon. Well, that was fun. Biggest question we got from corporate was they would ask us, "What the hell are you guys doing out there?" Well, this principle of what I call the objection resolution model, which is really a patient collaborative approach rather than a forceful, heavy-handed, high-pressure approach. It was really key, one of the keys to our success. So how does it work? Well, the very first thing you do is to, when you hear an objection, might just be a question, maybe it's not even a concern. Whatever the case is, you remember that every word out of your mouth is going to raise walls or lower walls. I share with my team about this image of you're standing outside a limousine and the window's scrolling up, the tinted window, and shutting you out where it's rolling down so they have a conversation. So literally every word out of your mouth is going to raise those walls or put them in the basement, as I like to say. Well, when we're patient, when we slow down a little bit, we usually will say something better. The first words out of our mouth, which again are a symbol and a sign of a patient delivery. The first words should be a statement of empathy. It's a statement of understanding, right? It's trying to find common ground. It's trying to find something that you can agree to, even if you disagree on other points. You may say something like, "I hear you. I understand. It's a great point. Great question. It's not the first time I've heard that," whatever the case might be. When you show empathy first, it keeps that window down. It might start creeping up because they're still skeptical, they're still suspicious. Maybe they're even defensive or antagonistic. But if you can show empathy, put yourself in their shoes, and not just it's not just lip service, right? It's not manipulative. You truly want to understand them. If you don't, you should probably go do something else, right? You're never going to be a top performer. People are going to feel high pressure. This can be used manipulatively. That's a mouthful, and you shouldn't do that, right? But if you're sincere, you show empathy. You make a statement like, "Help me understand here. I think it's a great question or a valid concern. Help me understand. I want to help." Those are all empathetic statements, right? There's another insight about this that I think plays into this, and that you should soften those statements. There's no reason. Crucial Conversations talks about this, but there's no reason why it should be forceful or combative, right? It's not a competition. It's not a war. Too often it becomes combative and antagonistic and tit for tat, both in our relationships, even in our work. It doesn't have to be. It shouldn't be. It's certainly not productive. But if you can show empathy and soften your statements by saying something like, "If you don't mind me asking," right? Or "Help me understand. I want to understand." Or that's really cool. That's really interesting. Tell me more. The very first thing you do should be to show empathy. Soften it in ways before, during, after. You might say, "If you don't mind me asking," you might say, I hear you. I understand. I think that's a great question." And then you soften before, during, and after step two. And what is step two? Step two is to ask a question. And not just a question, probably several questions. You might And again, to my point, you want to soften before, even during, and then after to help the pill go down easier, right? To help your delivery be received. Remember what I said about walls going down and walls coming up. So I say, if you don't mind me asking, when you say X, help me understand. I really truly want to hear you. There's another softener. What do you mean? Never use the word why. Why sounds combative. It's argumentative. Better to say, what do you mean? Or what are you trying to say? Or how can I help? That's step 2. You're patiently going through these steps. You've shown empathy. You've asked a question, maybe a follow-up question or two, and then you listen. Right? Remember, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. I remember a time I was on a ride along with a salesperson, and we rolled price. We showed the customer what it was going to cost, and she said, "Oh my gosh." And I felt the rep tense up next to me. We were sitting next to each other across the kitchen table, and he leaned forward. I could tell he was going to say something. Well, you get what you pay for, or some stupid response. And I grabbed his knee under the table to get him to stop. And do you know what she said? She said, "Wow, that's a lot less than I thought it was going to be." She wasn't even objecting, and he was ready to pounce, ready to overcome that objection. Too often, that is exactly how we react in conversations, in sales, in negotiation, in parenting. We're quick to react. We're quick to act. We don't stop and listen. We don't show empathy, ask questions, get them to open up and understand them. We're quick to pounce, and oftentimes we're wrong. He was completely wrong. She wasn't even objecting, and he was about to resolve her objection or overcome her objection. So anyway, when you ask good questions, you show empathy, keeps the walls down, you soften, you ask good questions, they're going to tell you more. I mean, that goes without saying, right? You're peeling back the layers of the artichoke to get to the heart of their concern. And so when you do this, guess what happens? They're going to talk. They're going to open up. Not always. Can't guarantee it, but it's much more likely that they will. And when they do, they will tell you what they need. It might take some prodding. It might take more softening statements, more empathy, even compassion, but they will show you how to help. As a salesperson, they'll show you and tell you how to sell them. I mean, it's extraordinary when you see it materialize before your eyes. You know what? It's fun. It's not a manipulative, high-pressure transaction. It's a collaborative, mutually beneficial, mutually respectful interaction. And at the end, people say, "Oh, I didn't even feel like you were selling me." I've heard that so many times throughout my career, where customers say, "Thank you. This was a different experience than I've experienced in the past. I didn't feel like you sold us. I just felt like you helped us." And that's ultimately the goal. One of the benefits of being patient in this way and following this model, this objection resolution model, is you resolve the objection or the concern together. And you want to be together in any conversation. You don't want it to be you against them, different sides of the table. You want to be, even if it's just metaphorically, sitting beside them, guiding them through the process. This can be with a child, a spouse, a customer, it doesn't matter, right? You're resolving that objection. You're patiently walking them through the steps, because sometimes it takes some time. Sometimes there's resistance. Oftentimes they need a little bit of hand-holding, as they say, a little bit of massaging. One of the great benefits of being patient in this way is that you formulate a better response. Just like my colleague, this young rep who was about to pounce and overcome an objection that didn't even exist, by slowing down, he realized he was wrong. And oftentimes we need to do the same. We talk about how there's a period of time between stimulus and response, and we can react, usually quickly, usually irrationally or inappropriately, incorrectly, or we can slow down, take a breath, count to 10, and respond. And when we do so, it's typically much more effective. So, another great resource. I could go on and on about that, but and then as just in closing, you repeat the process. You might have to rinse and repeat several times. You come back, you show more empathy, you ask more questions, you listen, you formulate a better response, you test that response, see if that answers their question, and then you rinse and repeat as much as you have to. One other tip that I'll give you, just a little sales tip, is try to speak in third person. When you speak for the masses, rather than in first person for yourself, there's a very interesting dynamic. It comes across softer, and yet it's stronger. If I say, well, this is why you should do this, Mr. Customer. Let's say I'm selling a clog-free rain gutter, and I say, you don't want to fall off your ladder. You know how many people get hurt each year on ladder falls? It's one of the top reasons people go to the ER. Well, I just sound like a salesperson. I sound pushy. That's why salespeople are oftentimes categorized as like car salesmen, nothing against them, but, like high pressure. When I say instead the same thing, but I say in third person, it feels completely different. It's a more patient, more proactive, much more mature, but much more effective response. When I say, I hear you, right? This is a big investment. I don't know about you, but the feedback we're hearing from customers is they don't ever want to be up on a ladder again. They know that it's one of the top reasons people go to the ER. They have friends and family who have been seriously injured falling off a ladder. It's just not worth it in their minds. That's why so many customers are working with us in this way. Blah, 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 right? When you're the messenger, when you slow down, think it through, and become the messenger rather than the message, you're speaking for the masses, not just for yourself. It's so much more credible. It's so much softer, but in reality, it is stronger. So, another little insight. But another great resource along these lines is the classic book Bonds That Make Us Free by C. Terry Warner. It teaches some powerful lessons that really complement this topic of patiency, or of patience. This is one of those books that, if you'll take the time to read it, it will change your life. I read it 30 years ago, and I've never forgotten it. I reflect on it often. I share it with others. Called Bonds That Make Us Free. The author is C. Terry Warner. He's actually written a whole series, and I highly, highly recommend it. Here's what my buddy Alex has to say. That's my personal nickname for my ChatGPT 4.0. Alexander, or Alex. He says, the main lesson the book teaches is about how our relationships and our interactions can be transformed by recognizing and letting go of self-deception and blame. Well, isn't that really what being patient is about? It's letting go of self-deception, letting go of blame, taking things in stride. Goes on to say it emphasizes how choosing compassion, and there's that word, and authenticity can free us from negative emotional bonds. I would add this, really in short, this book, it reminds us that true freedom in relationships and in our own hearts comes through introspection, through accountability, and through humility. Let me repeat those three characteristics. Introspection, where you're looking inward. Accountability, you're taking responsibility for it, not just passing buck, not being a victim, not pointing fingers. And humility, removing the ego. Isn't that really what being patient with others is all about? Is being introspective, being accountable, being humble? I love that. Think about this. The introspection, accountability, and humility, they may be a big lift. I mean, like I said at the very beginning, this is not the easiest trait to acquire or to remember, but it is central. These principles are central to finding true certainty in our lives. They all require patience, especially with ourselves. So we're up against our break. I'm going to come back. Let us have our sponsors look at you. You take a look at our sponsors. When we come back, I'm going to talk about being patient with ourselves. So I think it's a really important part of this conversation. I'm going to get into some examples from history of people that have really demonstrated for us and embodied what it means to be patient and the impact that it had. A couple other insights I'll share, including the very best example of all. And when we come back here on Finding Certainty. Thanks for being with me here on this beautiful Wednesday morning. Look forward to speaking with you. I'll be right back.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back here on Finding Certainty. It's Wednesday, June 4th. I'm calling to you and reaching out to you from Henderson, Nevada. And you know, this is the time of year that we just love. It's starting to warm up, but not too hot yet. It's not cold. It's kind of like San Diego weather for about 2 weeks. And then we get into hot. Anyway, the topic we're discussing here is this principle of patience. P is for patience, and how it is a core characteristic of developing certainty in our lives. I said, we talk a lot about being patient with others, but being patient with ourselves is equally as vital. We're our own worst critics, right? Really, usually tougher on ourselves more than anyone else, and yet we have to understand. We have to remember that growth takes time. That applies in our personal lives, it applies in our businesses. I think being impatient for change and growth and performance and success is a secret for dissatisfaction. It's a secret for, or it's an ingredient or a formula, as I would say, for uncertainty in our lives, for frustration, for anxiety even. Growth takes time, right? Healing doesn't happen overnight. Breaking bad habits, building new ones, learning new skills, building a company, none of it happens in the blink of an eye. There's an overnight success, and they joke about how the company or the artist was an overnight success that only took 20 years. All the times people don't see how much. In fact, I'd venture to say most cases people don't see and don't understand how much has gone on behind the scenes. But as entrepreneurs and artists, content creators, and others, we know the thousands of hours we put in, the all-nighters, the sacrifices, the debt we've gone into, we know how much sacrifice and expense and time, just time, it's taken. Yet when we're starting out, I think sometimes we have an unrealistic expectation that it's going to happen much faster than it is. I see all the time that most things take longer than you think they will and cost more than you wish they did. And yet it goes back to my quote at the very beginning about our expectations and reality. It's important to understand that this quote about making our expectations realistic to reduce the frustration does not mean that we make our efforts less significant, less consistent, or any of that. We put in the time. We have realistic expectations, but then we put in the time and effort to exceed that, to shorten the learning curve. We do things like get mentors and build a tribe and bring on partners and other things that help accelerate the process. Being patient and lowering expectations doesn't mean we do all that we can to speed it up, to do it as quickly as we can. Don't take 20 years if you do it in 2. I think it's an important principle, but we are all a work in progress. I think it's important that we remember that. We're never finished. We're never going to be done, not until we die. I have a good friend named David Aldridge on our team. He was actually our very first rep here at Certainty Management, and he's in his 80s now. In fact, many of our team members are 60s and 70s and 80s. We've attracted this unique audience of seasoned experts who've been around the block, and I love it. I love all the gray hair on our Zoom meetings each week. If you're a senior out there looking for a way to supplement your income, you may have decades of experience, but no one will hire you because you're pushing 80 or whatever the case might be. I encourage you to reach out to us. Check us out at certaintyteam.com. But anyway, I digress. But David, his name is David Aldridge. Every time I ask him how he's doing, in his 80s, late 80s or mid 80s, he says, excellent, but improving. I love that. You know, I talk about a patient perspective and really a proactive perspective. There's another P word that we could have focused on. It's the mindset that it doesn't happen overnight and I'm not done yet. I'm still a work in progress. I love a t-shirt my younger brother used to have when he was a kid. It says I'm not done yet. God don't make no junk. I love that. All right, so another one of my favorite books and one that can absolutely transform your outlook and your relationships is called Real Love by Greg Bear. I've talked about this one a few times on my shows, but the author Greg Bear, he highlights something very similar in this vein, talking about patience and perspective. Bear talks about removing expectations from our relationships. He says expectations are imposed on others. Promises are made by ourselves, made by us. And that distinction really changes everything. Patience says, I trust the process. I trust you. I trust that you have my best interests at heart, and you need to trust. You should be able to trust that I have yours. When I make a promise, it should be expected that I will keep it. But when I expect others, I'm imposing that expectation, that demand, that pressure on others. That's where it starts to get a little dicey, and it rarely produces good results. When we lead with patience and promises and love, rather than control and pressure, our relationships flourish. That's where patience pays dividends, and they are some of the greatest dividends in life. Let me share a quick story from this last week. There's a self-proclaimed online journalist, an investigative journalist, someone I'd call a bit of a crusader. He goes after crypto schemes and Ponzi schemes and MLMs and other things, but he publicly has criticized a project that we are big fans of, that we're affiliated with. It's a new social media platform called VidMe, VIDME. He's convinced it's going to fail, that the earnings projections are unrealistic, and et cetera, et cetera. He hasn't been very subtle about it. But I made a conscious decision to, rather than to fire back and defend ourselves, or rather than to sling mud. I think when both sides sling mud, everybody just gets muddy. I wish our politicians remembered that. But rather than coming back at him with the same tone, I decided to extend an olive branch. I invited conversation. I didn't know how it would go. I know I was putting myself at risk, especially because he live screens everything. But I didn't have anything to hide, and I believe in this project that's being spearheaded and has been founded by my good friends. To my surprise, he responded, and we've since had several conversations. Most of them I would consider productive. He's still skeptical. He's seen a lot of bad actors out there, and he's not convinced that this will do what they say it will. But I know the people behind it. I know their intents. I know their hearts. I've looked at the numbers. They're represented by one of the best law firms in the world. The list goes on, right? There's a lot of evidences why he should believe. But ultimately, he still has his doubts. And this is the kicker. We can agree to disagree. That's a skill set that's critical in business and critical in life, right? You can agree to disagree. You can agree to be patient with each other. We're talking, there's dialogue. He actually said he respects the fact that I'm willing to engage and willing to communicate. And in my book, that's a win. That's the power of patience. So, recent example just happened in the last couple of weeks. I'm still ongoing, actually. If you think about this in your own life, in your marriage or your partnerships, your friendships with your kids, your colleagues, your customers, consider your own reflection in the mirror first. Be patient with them, with the situation, and with yourself. How often do we miss the breakthrough that could have happened by, one, rushing it, reacting instead of responding, or two, passing the buck, being a victim, pointing fingers? I mean, how often do we miss that? We miss the connection or the breakthrough we could have had, the success we could have had, because we weren't willing to wait for it. There's the old adage that we can either react or respond, and the latter is infinitely better. We've been talking about that. Responding is when we stop, we take a breath, we count to 10, we resolve instead of overcome, just like I teach my sales team to do. I challenge you to try it. You'll be amazed by the results. In business, in many respects, patience leads to success. There's a pattern that we go through. I call it the cycle of confidence, or the confidence cycle, and it's really key to any endeavor. It's a principle of patience. It's a principle of success. It all starts with a desire. Okay, when we start out, we just want something to work. It might be a relationship, it might be a business, but we start with desire. It's like we plant this little seed and hope that it grows, right? And that's actually the next step. Actually, before that, we kind of go from desire. We have desire, but then usually we deal with some sort of stress, right? Some anxiety, maybe trepidation, worry, even fear, right? That's usually step 2, getting through that. Realizing that's the step. You just have to step past it. The next step is hope. Hope leads to faith. I believe that initial fear can bleed into hope, and hope, when you take action, you start to work, it can grow into faith. Like you take this seed and you plant it and you don't cast it out. You give it a chance to grow. You water it. Make sure it gets some sun. It's just hope at first. You see nothing but dirt, and then you see this little green shoot start curling up, and you keep working at it. Hope leads to faith, which, as they say, is the evidence of things not seen. Even when you start to see it, you see that little green shoot, you're like, there's no way this is going to grow into a tree, right? But faith in action makes a difference. It works. It takes patience, it takes persistence, but it works. And as evidences and proof, little by little, begin to appear, as they begin to emerge, just like that little shoot, In time, that fragile belief blossoms into faith, and not just faith, but perfect faith. It grows into knowledge, and eventually knowledge becomes certainty. None of that happens in a straight line. None of it happens instantly. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes persistence. Even with a seed, right? Well, even once it grows, no farmer, once that seed shoots up and grows into a corn stalk or wheat or an olive tree or whatever, none of them stop working on it. They don't stop tilling and watering and fertilizing it. It's an ongoing process, just like we, in our own lives, have to continue to work on our own characteristics of certainty, our core traits and attributes, like patience, right? As I think of patience, I think it would be incomplete without talking about delegation. It's another good example, right? When we hand off responsibility to people, we have to be patient. They're going to mess up. They're going to make mistakes. They're not going to do it as good as you could have. They're going to fall short, and that's all part of learning. But if we're not patient, if we're just micromanaging people, we'll never get done what we could, and we'll never have the relationships that we could have within our team and within our tribe, trusting others to grow into something, to grow into their role, to grow into confidence, to go through that confidence cycle themselves, from desire to fear to hope to belief to faith and belief and knowledge and perfect knowledge and even confidence eventually, or certainty. We have to give people time to get there. We have to give them opportunities to get there. If we don't, we're really missing out. We're doing them in our company a disservice. It could be our family. Maybe we're not doing it with our kids. We're doing our family and our children a disservice. Trusting others to grow. That's part of leadership. That's what mentoring is all about. That's what patience is all about. Not only does it help you get more done, but it also grows trust and it creates bonds. It could be lasting bonds, bonds that make us free, as the book title suggests. It is essential if you truly want to be an effective leader. Now, let me share some quick examples from history. There's a lot of great ones, right? Abraham Lincoln, he navigated this nation, this divided nation. He was mocked, he was misunderstood, he was even hated by many. Yet he led with composure. That was our C word. C is for composure. He led with long suffering. He united the country in the process. If you don't think that took him a lot of patience and persistence, you should probably go back and read the history books. Another great example I've always loved is Mother Teresa. She served for decades in some of the world's harshest conditions. She didn't expect change overnight. She showed up day after day with compassion, resolve, and patient persistence. You see this, there's another word, a pattern, right? You see these patterns come up. They're usually teaching, another word, a principle. She blessed the lives of millions and gained the respect of the world. She's considered a saint by many. And she's truly a great example of someone who embodied patience. We recently celebrated, just a few weeks ago, Martin Luther King Day here in the United States. And what an incredible leader, right? What a great example of someone who practiced nonviolent resistance, which in a very real sense means extraordinary patience in the face of violence and even hate. And eventually it cost him his life. In the process, he changed an entire nation by embodying this principle. Nelson Mandela is another example, one of my favorites. He was in prison for 27 years. He walked out a free man and chose reconciliation over revenge. He chose patience versus what? Versus retribution, versus hatred. His patience outlasted his oppression. Are we seeing a pattern? Do you want to be truly remembered? Because if you do, it seems to be that patience is a recurring theme. It's a characteristic that you should want to embody and assimilate into who you are. Gandhi's obviously another great example, right? He led an entire nation to independence, not through war, not through violence, but through patient persistence and peace. That's powerful. So these individuals weren't perfect. They each had their flaws. I'm sure they weren't perfect at even being patient all the time. I'm sure there were times they were just frustrated, right? And they lost their temper. And I mean, none of us do it perfectly, and none of us ever will. But they made an effort. They led by example, and they imbued everything they did with this principle. And I think they understood that real change, lasting change, takes time. They inspired others to follow in their footsteps. That's what patience gives us. It gives us the ability to impact others, to lead by example, and ultimately to lead others in a way that changes not only you, not only the outcome, but also changes them. And isn't that ultimately what we want to do? I should add that sometimes it's okay not to be patient with things. I mean, the current reality, right? Relationships, sometimes if it's a violent, domestic violent relationship or abusive or something like that, you should consider getting out. Right? There is a limit to patience. I'm not proposing that we ignore the obvious. Sometimes the current reality, whether it's a relationship or just a current situation, should be changed. It can be improved upon. This is what has led to many discoveries, inventions, and successful endeavors. Right? These impatient questions about, is this the best it can be? What can we do to improve? How can we make things better? It's exactly what the examples from history that I just shared with you did on significant scales. They weren't patient with the status quo. They weren't patient with how things were. They may have been patient through the process, but they weren't patient with the current reality. They wanted to affect change. And every artist, every entrepreneur, every parent, every one of us wants to affect change. We want to improve our situation and help improve those around us. Hopefully improve ourselves in the process. I mentioned VidMe, this new streaming platform, social media platform. It's actually a good example of this. It's founded by my good friends Mike Popovich, Mike Sharbo, Chris Miller. Mike, I've known for many years, Mike Pop, and one of the most generous, most giving, most just incredible people I know. He's one of the top 20 earners in a very successful direct sales company, been retired now for about 25 years, and does a weekly ministry that's broadcasts all over the world. His partner, Chris Miller, has been in social media for many years. His team that he was involved with manages over 100 million subscribers, social media subscribers. And yet they realized that there was a significant problem in the industry. The big companies, the big dogs in the industry, like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, they produced about $276 billion in 2024 alone. Yet they paid less than 10% to the artists, to the content creators, to those who are doing the work. Well, it's been going on for a long time. There's very few social media experts, content creators out there. There's exceptions, but there's very few who are earning significant income and earning what they're worth. And these guys, they said enough is enough. They've created a new platform where the content creators will get paid significantly more than they do on these other platforms. They don't have to leave those other platforms to come here. This is just one more, but it's going to pay them significantly more. And it's going to pay their fans and give them a vested interest in their favorite content creators. Everyone literally shares in the revenue, shares in the earnings, shares in the membership, shares in the branding deals. The list goes on. So it's an idea that, thanks to them, thanks to Mike and Chris and Mike, they weren't patient with. They weren't patient with the status quo, and they've created something that's going to bless the lives of millions. If you want to check it out, you can go to certaintysocial.com. It's certaintysocial.com. It's a pretty good example, though, of what I'm talking about. I encourage you to check it out. Share it with any content creators you know, anyone else out there looking to supplement their income. Easiest way to earn money online that I've found. Now, I'm not a pastor, but I am a believer. I would be remiss to not mention the greatest example of all. As we near our close here of today's show, let's consider the ultimate example of patience, and that is our Savior, Jesus Christ. Christ was, if nothing else, endlessly patient with his disciples, his doubters, his enemies. I thought about that a lot this last week or two as I've been dealing with this skeptic, this critic, right? Christ was supremely patient with those around him. He's patient with each one of us. And he asks us to do the same, right? To come unto him. His was the perfect example of how to do so. I mean, you think about it, he was betrayed, he was falsely accused, he was beaten, and even put to death. And even as he was hanging on the cross, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Even in agony, he still chose love. And that's just incredible to me. Whether you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew, doesn't matter. That's an example I think the world respects. What an example to try to remember and draw from. Taking the high road, giving the benefit of the doubt, even turning the other cheek as Jesus taught. It isn't weakness. These are some of the highest forms of strength. He didn't force belief. He didn't coerce others. He invited them to follow him. And we can do the same, either verbally or just through our examples. Because patience, just like so many of these principles, perpetuate themselves. They create ripple effects, mushroom effects. I even call it a snowball effect because it gets bigger and bigger as it grows. Christ, he just waited patiently. He's still waiting for many of us to answer that call. That, my friends, is the kind of divine patience, the kind of example I think we could all stand to learn from and seek to acquire and to embody in our own lives. As I wrap up this monologue, I want to leave you with a challenge. This week, find one situation where you'd normally react and don't. Pause, breathe deeply, count to 10, just wait. Just take a breath. Choose patience, see what happens. Whether it's a conversation or a criticism, a goal that's taking longer than you expect, or something you're wrestling with. Look up, reach up, take the high road, and try being patient. You might be surprised at the certainty and the confidence, the peace that it brings into your life. Until next time, thanks for joining me. I appreciate you sharing my show with others. You can do so at www.certaintylive.com. Just pass that along. I really appreciate it. You can find us on all the podcast channels, on YouTube. If you'd like to learn more about VidMe, go to certaintysocial.com. Hope you have a great rest of the week and weekend. Keep seeking, keep growing. Remember my friend Dave. He's excellent but improving. I love that. You can find more certainty in your life. It's out there. You can find it. We can help. I wish you the very best. Thanks. Have a great rest of the week, everybody, and a great weekend. And I'll see you next week. Take care.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of Finding Certainty. We hope you've gained some more insight into how to create more certainty in your own business or nonprofit. Join us next week for another taste of the certainty experience. Until then, we wish you greater certainty in all that you do.